We've been studying the greatest sermon, arguably, that's ever been preached before, the Sermon on the Mount. And this sermon is Jesus' charter for how to live in his kingdom. It's his manifesto for how to live in his kingdom. Jesus' kingdom, he's announcing right now, it's not a divergence from the hoped-for kingdom in the Old Testament. It's not some kingdom that's running in parallel to the anticipated kingdom from the Old Testament. Jesus' kingdom that he's inaugurating is the anticipated kingdom of the Old Testament story. So when Jesus calls for us to embody the Beatitudes so that we are the salt and light of the world, he is describing the kind of human society that God has been after all along through the pages of Scripture. So remember, the Old Testament story, what it does is time and time again is it reinforces God's demands. God's demand, what he's been looking for, is a covenant collaborator, a partner who will be loyal to him and stand between heaven and earth and issue out heaven's blessings into the world. The problem of this demand is that nobody in the Old Testament story could measure up. The story of Israel in the Old Testament, the law, the prophets, the writings, they weren't meant to cause us to rise to the occasion and fulfill their demands. What they were meant to do was to tear us down, to teach us that we can't possibly begin to meet God's demands. They were meant to expose our inability. So what the Old Testament then should have produced is people who are poor in spirit. It's people who are mourning. It's people who are meek, who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness, on and on. That's the kind of people who are humble before God, reliant on him, and then who he uses to be salt and light in the world. That's what Jesus is articulating in the Sermon on the Mount. He's saying, guys, you missed it. I'm here to establish the kingdom that's been anticipated. But the problem is, Jesus' audience, and this is just like the human heart through all of time, this is the human condition. Jesus' audience is obsessed with justifying themselves. And do you know what a heart that's set on establishing itself before others, justifying itself, is going to do every single time? It's going to take those demands, it's going to take the law, and it's going to frame it in very incredibly narrow and shallow criteria. That way, it's more manageable. That way, we can do it. So Jesus' audience has been thinking, for example, as long as I don't commit murder, that's one of the commands of the Old Testament, then I'm good. I'm righteous. And so they judged themselves by a very shallow criteria, which allowed them, and it gave them literally permission to hate other people. And over time, they actually moralized hating other people instead of realizing that the command to not murder was meant to reach down into the very depths of your heart and root out that seed of anger which leads to murder. But since they didn't read the Old Testament that way, that same heart of hatred, that same heart of anger, although it didn't find its outlet in murder, it found its outlet in words and assassinating another person's character and gossip and slandering and looking down on other people. They thought to themselves, as long as I'm not committing sexually immoral acts with someone who's not my wife, I'm righteous, because that's the command, is don't have sex outside of marriage with someone who's not your wife. And so they took then the allowance, the accommodation of divorce and remarriage in the Old Testament and said, I want that person over there. I can't have them. So I'm going to use this permission, this accommodation in the law of divorce and remarriage to have what I really want. See, they reduced the law to a very simplistic, doable thing that made something evil actually look moral, to make them feel good about themselves, that they still were righteous. So you could summarize the whole problem of the Old Testament in the mindset like this. Go ahead and put this up here behind me. Here's the problem in summary. Let's simplify the demands of the law, of the story of God. Let's do enough just to appear righteous. Let's then perform those things and self-justify, all the while an untreated, undetected, sinful heart still motivates everything that we're doing. And so the same heart that's operating underneath murder, the same heart that's operating underneath adultery, is still operating underneath seemingly good behavior, seemingly righteous law-keeping, because they didn't let God's demands go to the very depths of the heart to expose what's in the heart and deal with what's in the heart. So Jesus, today, he's honing in on another part of the law that was oversimplified and used for their own ends, which is oath-making. Read with me Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 33. Jesus teaches, saying, again, you've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Now, I know what you're thinking, because it's what I was thinking when I first came across this passage. You're thinking, what are we going to do with this? This is so out of touch with our day and age, right? I have a friend. He's one of the pastors here. I won't mention him by name. He did preach last week. And he used to have this part of his sense of humor where I would be excited about something, and he wouldn't give me the time of day with it. He wouldn't look. He wouldn't respond. He would withhold the gratification of his response. It was a very cruel sense of humor. And for instance, one time I made macaroni and cheese for community group, and I was really excited about it. I even texted everybody before, and I know that this person told everybody, eat the macaroni and cheese, but don't say a word about it. I know that's what he did. And then when no one said anything, I was like, oh. This other time, though, I got him back. Because I had this picture on my phone I wanted to show him. And he was checking his email. He's texting somebody. He was acting like he was preoccupied. Do you remember this? I'm talking to you. I didn't know you were in here. I thought you were in City Kids. I had this picture on my phone, and he wouldn't give me the time of day. And all of a sudden, he looks at my phone, and there on my phone is a picture of a sonogram. My first kid, and not Carter, I won't mention names, but this person, their jaw dropped. They were so stunned and surprised. It was very gratifying in that moment. The point of this illustration is that it's very possible to just glance by something, speed by something, just because you think this isn't really important, this isn't significant. But if you settle on it long enough, pay attention to it, it is more important than you initially think. At stake in today's teaching is the very integrity of God's people. That's what Jesus is after, our integrity. So first, what Jesus is going to do is he's going to expose our shallow integrity, beginning with me in verse 33. Again, you've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. So what Jesus is doing here, you see this is in quotes, but he's not actually quoting a direct Old Testament reference. What Jesus is doing is he's synthesizing different demands of the Old Testament surrounding oath-making into one idea. So a few examples here. One of the 10 Commandments is you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. In Leviticus 19, it is said, you shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of the Lord. I am the Lord. Numbers 30 says, if a man vows a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by a pledge, he shall not break his word. Deuteronomy 23 says, if you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay fulfilling it, for the Lord your God will surely require it of you. So to swear is to affirm the truth of a statement while calling on a witness to hold you accountable. And so in this time, what they could do, a permission given to them, is they could call God as their witness for their words that they have spoken. This is the same thing as saying, as God as my witness, I will. As God as my witness, folks, the Bengals are going to win the Super Bowl this year. Like, it's things like that. It's to give severity and weight, which I would never swear that because I'm not confident of it. But they would use God's name as a way to really give freight behind their words. Words had gravity. And so if you swore by someone's name, if you swore by something outside yourself, it infused your words with even more severity. Think about, words had such gravity in this time, and we don't really get this today. Think about the blessings and curses in the Old Testament. When I read these passages where a patriarch speaks blessings and curses over his sons, I'm always a little bit confused because I'm like, these curses that are spoken, surely these sons who are hearing it can avoid them because now they know what to look out for, right? But yet somehow every single time each one of those lines ends up living into that destiny. And how is that? Why is that? It's because there's such a psychological power to the words spoken by the patriarch that they hound you, harass you, follow you all the days of your life until it's manifest destiny, blessings or curses. The point is that words in this time had such gravity to them. So you can see there's quite a bit at stake when it comes to making oaths in the first century. And so when they would swear by the name of the Lord, they would make a promise and bring him in as witness. It was a very serious thing. So what the human heart does is it likes to innovate, to still appear righteous, but also let itself off the hook. So what people did in this time is they didn't invoke God's name in their oath making. They just simply invoked something more inferior and therefore less binding. So as verses 34 through 36 mentioned, they'd swear by heaven, they'd swear by earth, they'd swear by Jerusalem, they'd swear by their own head. And Jesus forbids this. In verse 37, he says, let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. So the question we got to wrestle with is what's so evil about swearing by heaven, swearing by Jerusalem, swearing by earth, swearing by your own head? What's so evil about this? Jesus says, I forbid it, it's evil. Why? It's because it's dishonesty cloaked as integrity. See, if you can swear by things that are less binding, you can appear serious in a conversation with someone, therefore earn their trust. And then if you don't follow through, if it doesn't work out, you're off the hook. They would say, I didn't swear by God, so it's not binding, it's not damning if it doesn't work out. They're using a provision of the law, a seemingly moral thing, to their advantage. They're weaponizing swearing an oath to procure trust with no cost to themselves, to their moral reputation. It's a clever way to get someone to agree with you without ever putting yourself at risk. And if it doesn't work out, your sense of self can stay intact. Very convenient arrangement. Again, remember our summary of the problem. You can put it up here. Let's simplify the demands. Let's do enough to appear righteous. Let's perform and self-justify. All the while, underneath is an untreated, rotten heart that still motivates everything that we're doing. That rotten heart, it's not finding an outlet in straight up lying and dishonesty in this case. That rotten heart is finding an outlet in seemingly morally presentable things like oath making. It's dishonesty cloaked as integrity, and Jesus is exposing their very shallow idea of it. But what's operating really in the center of this heart that's cloaking integrity with dishonesty? What's in the center of this heart? What keeps this cycle going? Jesus goes one step deeper into the human heart and shows that this shallow integrity comes from a heart of manipulation. Within the heart that throws around oath making is manipulation. Think about it. They would call a jury to be an eyewitness to their words. They call on heaven, they call on earth, they call on Jerusalem, they call on their own body. But look what Jesus says about each in verse 34. I say to you, don't take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is the footstool of God, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Do you see what Jesus is teaching here? He's saying if you swear by these inferior things, guess what? God is still Lord of them all. God's not bound. He's over all. He's present amongst all. He bears witness to every single word because this whole domain is his. Like Psalm 24:1 says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and the world and those who dwell therein. God sees it all. God sees to the bottom of our hearts. He sees past our righteous words, our presentable words, to our very motivations. So no one else might know that your seemingly upstanding character, your rule keeping is actually all for your sake. But God does, because you can't hide from him. And so Jesus is saying God will judge you as a liar, as a person without integrity, and you can protest all you want, that you held yourself accountable to lesser things, less binding things, that you kept the part, that you looked the part, you said all the right words. But God sees a dishonest heart that is simply weaponizing honest appearances to contort others and situations for your own ends. So look, we're not in an oral culture like first century here. Back then, to make a transaction, there are no e-docs to sign, there's no signatures, there's no legal documentation. The only thing you had was your word. So this seems out of touch with us, right? This has no relevance to us at all, right? Well, we use moral signals all the time to accrue trust so that our manipulation is more effective. We posture ourselves to seem moral and altruistic, so we can position ourselves advantageously to capitalize on an opportunity. We can move through life very easily. We can move through relationships very easily, like a Weasley used car salesman using our words and reputation to contort people and situations into our desired outcomes. I mean, what do you think flattery is, for example? It's appearing kind, but really it's disarming someone by an impression of kindness so you can turn them to your ends. What do you think avoiding confrontation is? It's appearing peaceful, but really it's manipulating a situation for my own protection. What do you think people-pleasing is? It's appearing compliant and agreeable, but really it's capitalizing on other people's needs for my own desires. What do you think making half-hearted commitments is? It's in the moment saying I can help, I'll be there, I'll show up, but really I'm more committed to finding my way out of this commitment for my own convenience. Have you ever made plans to get yourself out of another plan? Have you ever made promises or agreements with no intention of keeping them? Have you ever performed ministry, done good service in order to sway people to you? Have you ever prayed, quote unquote, the right way in order to garner some respect? Have you ever changed your behavior before someone with power and influence so you could position yourself into their favor? Have you ever made a friend? Not because you loved that person, but because they served a future advantage for you. Are you always looking for how you can monetize, commodify, objectify a person, exploit a situation, find a hack, a shortcut to make something work for you with little cost to you, turn an opportunity, a resource for your favor? Have you ever virtue signaled to get your community to like you? Have you ever exaggerated your resume, your story, your accomplishments? Look, we can look the part, we can say the right thing, and it passes the test. But it's all token integrity. It's integrity that's really dishonesty. So just like Jesus' audience that throws around oaths to gain trust for selfish reasons, we can act altruistically. We can appear moral. We can even appear pious, but it's simply a selfish heart finding an outlet through good presentation. It's possible to do just enough to seem trustworthy so no one knows better, but God sees it and God will not honor it. It's no different to him than dishonesty. The manipulative heart hidden behind good appearances is just as guilty before God as bold-faced lying of scheming politicians and con men. Now, what you might not be aware of is that this heart that animates such behavior is so destructive. It's so destructive. I mean, think about this. If you're the person who's walking into every environment thinking to yourself, how can I manipulate my environment, turn every conversation, turn every interaction for my own gain, for my own favor, for my own advantage? At first, in that scheme, you're conscious of it. You're going in, trying to move the pieces around in the room. But you know what happens over time? That becomes habituated into you as a part of your muscle memory. And once you were in control of the game, you were in control of your environment, but now your own manipulative heart has made you a slave. You don't even know you're doing it consciously. You don't even know you're moving through life like that. You are being destroyed. You are losing your integrity. It's so destructive to the self. It's so destructive to others. I mean, think about this. We are meant to move through life giving honor and dignity to image bearers of God. But when we use people as means to an end and treat them instrumentally, what do you think we're teaching people? What are we pressing into people, even unconsciously into them? What we're teaching people is that they are only as good as they serve us. That their dignity, their value is only as high as the instruments that we can make them in our schemes. Here's what Dallas Willard says about manipulation. It's making use of people, trying to bypass their understanding and judgment to trigger their will and possess them for our purposes. So instead of healing people by restoring dignity, we reinforce within others that they are only as good to us as their benefit to us. And the reason why this is so destructive is because the people who we're taking advantage of, the reason why they're already vulnerable to us, why they're coming to us, why they're open to us in the first place, is likely because they're hurting, likely because they need help. When we use people for our own purposes, we send people deeper into pain. deeper into regret. It's so destructive. After exposing how shallow our integrity is, Jesus asks our heart, are you using a good appearance for your own ends? If so, that lacks integrity. That's not integrity. But we can look at this passage too from another vantage point. There's another reason why Jesus absolutely forbids taking oaths. He outlines integrity in a different way. Look at verse 34 again with me. He says, but I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, it's the throne of God, by earth, that's his footstool, by Jerusalem, that's the city of the great king. Do not take an oath even by your own body. You cannot make one hair white or black. Do not take an oath at all. Now here's the thing. This is pretty interesting. Nowhere in the Old Testament does it require us to swear by the name of God, to make oaths. It says when you do this, or if you do this, here's the guardrails to put in place. What Jesus is doing in this whole section of Scripture, he says, you've heard it said, but I tell you. He says that time and time again throughout this passage, right? What Jesus is doing is he's not throwing out the Old Testament, but he's rightly, fully interpreting it for us. We've got it wrong. He's rightly and fully interpreting it for us. But in this case, he throws it out completely. He says, do away with this. Don't take oaths anymore. Don't take an oath at all. One commentator says this, Jesus is not so much opposing Old Testament legislation as he is telling his disciples not to take up an option which the law offered, but did not require. God was putting accommodations on a cultural norm, a cultural practice in the ancient Near East. It was never a requirement. Jesus says, it's not a requirement, throw it out. Don't use it anymore. Why would Jesus do away with this totally and completely? Jesus is saying, don't swear by anything at all. Listen here, don't swear by anything at all. Because when you do that, you are invading a position that only God can occupy. Because you're not in control. You can't promise outcomes. You can't guarantee anything. You are not in charge. Integrity, then, isn't only a heart emptied of manipulation. Integrity is also accepting human limitations. If you don't, you're not honest about reality. That lacks integrity. Integrity is living in alignment with the human limits that God has set in place. To do otherwise is dishonest about who you are and about what is true. So Jesus, after shining a light on the shallow integrity of manipulation, now he does it on our limits. See, to swear by something like they were doing, Jerusalem, my body, heaven, earth, is to say that your word is your guarantee, and that guarantee is accountable by whatever you swear to. So if you swear by heaven, you're saying that you have control as far as heaven is concerned. But only God is the ruler of heaven, not you. If you swear by earth, you're saying that you have control as far as the earth is concerned, but God is the ruler of earth, the creator of earth, not you. Don't even swear by your own body. We think we have such agency. We think we have control at least over this immediate thing. Jesus is saying, you're not even in control of your own body. God is Lord of your body, not you. You're not in charge of how things go, not in heaven, not in earth, not in the city, not even in your own body. Integrity is living in acceptance of this fact. The problem here, though, is twofold, okay? We really, this is so hard for us to get because we, one, refuse limits. We hate limits on us. We want to be as gifted as other people, not as gifted as we are. We want to have what other people have, not which God has assigned to us. See, God has set reality in place, and part of that reality is who you are, how you are, what you have, all that is you in this moment of time. That is reality. And our gifts, they function effortlessly and beautifully and fruitfully. We realize our potential when we embrace these things, our limitations, instead of envying somebody else's. But we're so right now in our culture saturated with comparison that we hold our limits in contempt. The other problem, though, all at once, is that we feel limitless too. We very much so are sensitive to our limits, and at the same time, we feel limitless. So let me explain this. Theologically and ontologically, God alone is omniscient, meaning God is all-knowing. But in some way, We are too. Let me explain. 4 reasons why I think, like in a sense, functionally, we are omniscient or we feel omniscient. 1, we have access to so much knowledge. I mean, think about it. We are at such a privileged point in history. You can get a college education on YouTube if you want, you know? You have all of history and all the global happenings in real time at your fingertips. You know, I would say even like as a pastor, someone who loves theology, someone who wants to read a lot of books and understand doctrine and have sound doctrine, we live at like the best time in the history of the world. We stand on the other side of 2,000 years of the church trialing and erroring doctrine, trying to get it right through confessions and creeds and councils and all these books and all this writing. We stand downstream from that and we get to benefit from all of it. I really believe right now in the life of the church has this chance to actually have the clearest, holistic, total theology like never before because we have so much behind us that we get to benefit from. The point I'm making is we have a broad scope of knowledge, and the scope is only broadening even more. We have access to it all. Second reason why we feel omniscient is we can predict the future. So the previous generation, let me give you an example here. A flu epidemic could be predicted based on analyzing thousands of doctors' reports in hundreds of clinics. Once symptoms were described, doctor types them into database. Someone in headquarters somewhere would analyze and conclude that an epidemic is on the rise. Google and Apple can do that now in minutes by simply monitoring words that people type in their Gmail, search bars, text messages, cross-reference those key phrases and words with the database of diseases, and voila. With all that data compiled, the future is predictable. Recommendations are made to mitigate the disaster. The same phenomenon helps us predict economic crisis, domestic threats, international conflict, global phenomenon. Third reason why we feel omniscient, like we feel limitless, is because this information age, these databases, now they're interacting with our very humanity. Many sociologists will say that we're living in an era of human evolution right now. So like your Apple Watch, it monitors your lifestyle patterns, which are then analyzed, and then optimizations are offered based upon your caloric intake, your cholesterol, when you sleep best, on and on. Your humanity literally is getting optimized by your wristwatch. Or think about genetic testing like 23andMe. Your dispositions, your biological weaknesses are accurately noted so we can treat things and even prevent things that are in your DNA. We can slow down aging like never before. We can prolong life like never before. It seems that there is no stopping the ascent in a never-ending upward spiral of human evolution. And so the trap of our human condition is being lifted, and the databases and analytics that we rely on will make recommendations that help us leapfrog our limitations. And then lastly, the opportunities are endless. I mean, if you were born in Italy 150 years ago, you know what you'd do? You grow up to inherit your father's legacy. If your father was a baker, you're a baker. If your father was a blacksmith, you're a blacksmith. If your father was a farmer, you're a farmer, on and on. You're not leaving, you're staying. Now, 150 years later, we have so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity for lateral movement, upward growth. There's always the next hill to climb, the next mountain to summit, the next. And then with globalization and social media, the world has become so much smaller. With enough planning, with enough hacking, with enough budgeting, we can see it all. At this point in the history of the world, functionally, guys, like we're kind of omniscient. But despite all the feelings that we are without limits, there are signs that we are not what we think we are. Do you know how discouraged I can get when I think about all the sermons in my queue that I haven't listened to yet? All the books I've saved in my queue that I probably won't get to for a long while. There's so much out there, so much curiosity, so much I want to learn, so much I want to get into, but I have to sleep. I can't focus that long. Do you know why international conflict creates such anxiety? We can guarantee that it's going to happen, but we can't guarantee any outcomes. Do you know why we feel such dread about our own bodies? We can't stop the aches, the wrinkles, the breakdown. We can delay it, but we can't guarantee it's going to stop. Do you know there's this thing called decision paralysis? FOMO, fear of missing out. Why can't we make a choice at all? Why can't we make a choice and stick with it? Because there's so much opportunity. There's too much opportunity. Do you know why parents end up as helicopter parents? Because we know too much about the danger out there, the risk out there. We're too aware. We're hyper aware, and we become hyper vigilant. See, we have convinced ourselves that we can control things because we know so much, can be so much, can do so much more, but we don't have the power to promise anything or be everywhere. In other words, we might feel omniscient, but we are not omnipresent and we are not omnipotent, all powerful and everywhere like God is. We are not God. We are only creatures. We have creaturely finitude. So don't swear by heaven. Don't swear by earth. Don't swear by your own head. You are not in charge. Accept your limits. And let me just say this. This is why some of us here have a non-existent prayer life. 0. Because you've bought into the cultural fad right now that you can lift the limits and be more and do more and have more and ascend and ascend. It's when we come to the end of ourself and realize this is where I stop, that's where God begins. And that transaction, that threshold where I reach my limit, that's where you hit your knees in prayer and let God take over. This is the reason why some of us here don't see any value in prayer, don't have any passion for prayer, don't prioritize prayer, because we think that we are God, and we are not. We're limited. And to ignore that fact is what Jesus is calling dishonesty, a lack of integrity, because integrity is deeply bowing to reality. Now, the worst thing about refusing limits and feeling limitless is it cuts you off from receiving the gift of the present, the gift of the life that God has apportioned to you. Think about this. The happiest that we, humanity, has ever been was we were back in the Garden of Eden. There, God was in charge. There, we were in the Father's house. There, he protected us. He gave us his wisdom. He gave us his instructions. Limits were placed on us, and we embraced those limits, and we flourished underneath those limits. God wants to be our Father, but when we seek the seat of God in our life, what we're doing is we're trying to be adults when we're just kids. I mean, imagine this. Can you imagine trying to navigate the complexity of, let's say, the New York subway system as a 5-year-old? Imagine if I took my daughter Harper, 5-year-old Harper, dropped her off in the subway and said, I'll meet you in Brooklyn tonight. Good luck. Can you imagine if I said, I want to build a treehouse, Harper. Here's all the supplies. Here's the tools. We'll have a slumber party tonight. Go ahead and build it. I'll see you this evening. What would happen? She'd be paralyzed. That's what we're bringing on ourselves when we refuse limits and think we're limitless. To be without limits, it sounds great, doesn't it? To be more, to have more, to be what they are, not what I am. It sounds great, doesn't it? Till you realize it means you're all on your own. You've kicked God out. You occupy the center of your life now. He does not. We wonder why we're paralyzed by depression. We wonder why we're paralyzed by anxiety. We wonder why we're so cynical moving through life. We don't like who we are. We wish we could be somebody else. You know what all that self-loathing, all that self-criticism, all that ingratitude is doing to you? It's turning your heart away from celebrating the goodness of life into being cynical about all things. You're so focused on what you don't have instead of celebrating what you do have and who you are and what God's apportioned to you. Do you know why we have no joy? Why our joy seems to be corroding year by year? It's because we burden ourselves with expectation for more output, more experiences, more knowledge. What's all that striving going to do for you? What's all that worrying going to do for you? What's all that spinning your tires in the mud going to do for you? Nothing but rob you of joy, because you're not meant to be omniscient, because you're not omnipotent, and you're not omnipresent. You are not God. Integrity is more than just not lying. It's living in congruency with reality itself. It's acceptance of limits. It's honoring design. It's running at God's pace, not impulsivities. It's patience and waiting on God. It's resolve to do what is in your power and release what is not. It's acceptance of your limits as a gift, because of in those limits, I will flourish and I will optimize my potential rather than wasting what I do have, chasing what I am not. Integrity is how I maximize the joy of the little circle that God has assigned to me, that God has just curated for me personally, accepting that as a gift from my Father. That's integrity. Here's Jesus' final instruction, verse 37. Let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. So after Jesus exposes manipulation in our hearts, after Jesus exposes our refusal of limits, resistance to limits within our character, he now clarifies the standard for the people in his kingdom. Here's what the standard is. Ready? Say what you mean and mean what you say, nothing more. In other words, be a person of simplicity. Accept those limits. Live in those limits. Be content. Deeply bow to God's reality. This person who's simple, they don't need anything from anybody, so they're not seeking to squeeze something out of a conversation or a situation for themselves. They deeply accept what they are as a gift from God. Simplicity. Doesn't that sound nice? Doesn't that sound nice to you guys? You know what this is called? This is called freedom. This is called freedom. Freedom feels like accepting what comes your way instead of always vying and positioning for more. It's when you stop taking yourself so seriously, stop being so critical of yourself, and start enjoying what you are and what you have and who you are. So here's my closing question. Would you like to know how to welcome integrity deeper into your being? Would you like to know how to possess this freedom that Jesus has in mind here? Would you like to know that? Here's what it is. It all comes down to this. Here's the hinge point. It's trust. Trust is the pathway to freedom that fosters integrity. Let me read to you a few selected verses here that give color and shape to trust. Here's what trust looks like. Psalm 84, verse 8. No good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. No good thing will our Father withhold from us when we trust him. If you commit to believing this, if you live into this, you'll be less inclined to manipulate others because they don't have the good things you desire. God does. And he will bring it about to you. He will offer it to you in his way and in his timing. Psalm 131, verses 1 and 2. I love this. Oh Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. What does this mean? It means I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. I've calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. The person of simplicity, of acceptance, of trust is pictured here as a baby in milk comatose. You see that baby in milk comatose. He's just milk drunk. They're out. Why are they? What's the picture here? What's it supposed to teach us? That baby doesn't need anything. It's not crying for anything. It's not demanding anything. It's at rest in the Father's arms. And that's all the baby needs. This is a noteworthy picture of trust. Our Father holding us, which means then we have no lack. I don't need to know what I think I need to know. All I need is his presence. The answer is I think I need, I actually don't need. The outcomes I'm always angling to try to guarantee, I don't need those either. All I need is the arms of the Father around me. If I'm living before the smile of God, I can release everything that's not my problem and let it be God's problem, my great concern. If there's anything I'm responsible for, it's living in this personalized world that God has given to me and taking responsibility for that and enjoying what's there and letting everything beyond that be God's problem, not mine. Psalm 16, you hold my lot. The lines, okay, the boundaries, right, the limits have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, in those limits, I have a beautiful inheritance. So look, you might not have everything you've ever wanted, but what do you have? What has the Lord given you? All we have, all we are. It's a gift. And when we trust God, we begin to see it that way. So often we despise our limits. So often we despise our lack. But what if our limits and what if our lack is actually a gift? The lines have fallen for us in pleasant places. When we accept that, indeed, we have a beautiful inheritance. Psalm 31:5, let me read this one for you. My times are in your hand. Man, we are so focused on speeding things up. We are so focused on finding a hack that's going to somehow hack time itself and bring the future into the present. We are addicted to instant results. We are addicted to outcomes right away. We are addicted to knowing the future right now. Look, God's timing is perfect. And what comes our way or does not come our way, it's all in God's hands. His will, his way, his timing, and he is a good Father. Our times are in your hand. I don't need to worry about anything else. God will bring it when he wants. Now, if you were to read Psalm 136, last psalm here, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you'll see David over and over, the refrain is, look what you've done in history, God. Look how you've come through. Look how you've acted mightily in our salvation history. And then the refrain underneath each one of those mention of a great historic act of God is this line, for his steadfast love endures forever, which means, God, how you've always acted, your reputation based on the past is how things are going to go from here on out. Your future, how it's going to go, is hidden in God's past. His steadfast love endures forever. So I know life is hard. God is not going to spare us of hard things. I know that. I'm not saying that. But will God ever stop being who he is? Has he ever actually let you down? Has he proven himself to you time and time again? Has he been reliable? He has. In total, I don't need to get my way. I don't need to lift my limits. I can take what comes and reside in whatever God has allotted to me. God will do right by me. He has never let me down. This, in Jesus' vision, will result in a community of truth tellers, a people of integrity. If you want to live a life of trust, if you want to live a life of deep and real total integrity, do you want to know the last and final knockout blow to your lack of integrity and to your lack of trust in God? The final knockout blow is Jesus himself. When you look at Jesus, he is the embodiment of integrity. Jesus, he entered into every conversation and into every situation, and he always got it right. He never squeezed anybody for affirmation. He never took advantage of anybody else. He entered into every single scenario living as a blessing. Why is that? Why do you think that is? Because Jesus did not operate from a place of deficiency, needing something from somebody or something. He operated from a place of abundance, always being filled by the love of the Father so he could go out into the world and unleash and abound in that blessing to other people. Jesus, he's the embodiment of total integrity. Philippians 2 says that he put aside his divinity. Jesus is totally 100% God, totally divine, but he did not tap into his divine resources unless prompted by the Holy Spirit. He lived in his limits. He accepted his limits. You think Jesus could have been more than he was? Absolutely. But he stayed content in the will of the Father. Do you know why that is? Because he was constantly reminded in the very depths of his heart that God loved him, and that God was with him, and that God would not withhold anything from him, and that it would all be okay. And here's the thing. This is why this is the knockout blow. What Jesus has, he can give to you. What Jesus has, he can give to you. And so here's the thrust. Here's what we ought to do. Here's what we should be obsessed with. If you want to develop greater trust in God that will lead you down the pathway to integrity, get to the secret place and be filled up with the love of God. Open up your heart to him and receive his love. Be smiled upon by him. Live before his smile, like Jesus, who's always constantly reminded of how the Father loved him, therefore operating at abundance and accepting and thriving in his limits. We can have the same in the secret place. Jesus' vision for us is to be a people of total and deep integrity. Let it be so. Let's stand together and let's pray. Jesus, what you have, we need. The abundance you have, we need. The trust in the Father you had, we need. And therefore, the love that constantly was poured into your heart from above, we need too. God, give us the strength, the faith right now to release certain things that keep us back from trusting you. Help us to release the things that keep us in cycles of manipulating other people. Help us to release the things that keep us in a place of contempt for our limits and refusal to accept our limits. In its place, Lord, pour your love into our hearts so we know that you are good, that you smile over us, that you're trustworthy, that you'll always do right by us, so that we can thrive in who we are and what we have and honor you. God, do great work in our hearts. Make us your people, a people of integrity. Forgive us, God, for the manipulative enterprises in our life, and forgive us, God, for not trusting you with what you've apportioned for us. God, help us to trust you more and more and more. We pray all this in your name, Jesus. Amen.